12 or go home. I'm Brandon Shanahan, joined as always by Iowa broadcasting legend Drew Russell. Drew, it's been March for a few weeks now, but now it's officially March.
Brandon, I'm like the dog on the first day of pheasant season. I am chomping at the chain right now. Let me loose. I want to talk brackets. I want to talk about the mayhem that is the NCAA tournament. We got to break down Big 12 tourney. This is the best time of year. You can't beat it. You really can't.
No kidding, it's pretty great. We do have to update the sandwich graphic.
Ooh, here we go.
Slow week, but I didn't want to skip over this number, so I'm like, all right, let's put the brakes on it. So now we're up to easy number 10, Heisman Trophy winner Robert Griffin III. One of my favorite color commentators, certainly on like a secondary level game, like ESPN2. He was built for ESPN2. Maybe not like an ABC game,
Yeah.
Maybe leave those to Kirk and company, but RG3, I mean, electric on a ESPN2 or a Pac-12 After Dark when the Pac-12 existed.
Mm-hmm. Well, I always find the broadcast industry interesting, Brandon, because when you talk about, say, the A block game or the B block game, which are usually you're going to put your best broadcast teams on, you want somebody who's a little more semi-buttoned down. They'll break down the game extremely well, but you kind of know what you're getting out of them, and usually it's pretty good analysis if you're working at that level. But you're dead right. When it comes to those late night games or just games that the two teams' fan bases care about, but maybe most of the country doesn't, or a chunk of it at least. And RG3 is elite. I mean, that's a type of guy like the famed Pac-12 After Dark, RIP. Maybe it'll be Big 12 After Dark next year. Who knows what we're going to get on that broadcast package. You want somebody like RG3 at midnight on a random September evening just to be ranting about whatever. You live for that. Like, that, as a football fan, you live for that after 13, 14 hours of sitting on the couch.
No kidding. That's and that's the funness about it, because it is nice to have Kirk and Fowler on the primetime ABC broadcast, and of course Joe Klatt and Gus Johnson. They're as dynamic of a duo for the Fox A block. But and they're so good at building up the moment for what it is. But when you get to these secondary games, like Utah versus Oregon State, 9:00 tip off, like you got to induce some energy, and there you get some opportunity to kind of have some fun. And nobody has more fun than RG3 in the broadcast booth. Let me ask you this: while we're on the topic of the broadcast industry, I saw a couple weeks ago that Fox let Greg Olson know that Tom Brady's going to get the A block. I get it. I mean, you're paying him A block money for sure.
Yeah, you
but,
are. Yeah,
man, Greg's done such a good job.
Yeah, if you're Greg Olson, he's handled it extremely well. Handled, I think, better than most, at least publicly. I'm sure privately he's probably upset, disappointed. How could you not be? But he's handled it really well publicly. I'm sure every single company executive has seen him handle it extremely well. And you just mentioned his name, and I think he's terrific for the college game. But if I'm Amazon Prime, I would openly look. Kirk Herbstreit is not a bad analyst at the NFL level. He's competitive. But him and Al Michaels, for some reason, don't have outstanding chemistry. If I'm Amazon Prime, I mean, I would look into it. I think for him, he still gets good games. No, he's not going to get a Super Bowl. Playoff game going to be limited, but it keeps him getting regular reps in a very noticeable time slot. And eventually, when, Chris Collinsworth leaves or whomever is that, next decision, or if Tony Romo fumbles the bag, Greg Olson's going to be right there, Brandon. There's no doubt about that.
Yeah, that's a good point, because I was thinking, I'm like, well, CBS kind of has their guys tied up with Tony Romo. ESPN just brought on Buck and Troy Aikman.
Yeah.
So there's not a lot of these jobs to go around.
Right.
But then, would you rather go do the Amazon Prime game every standalone game? Would you rather get the Fox B game? I don't know. But you're absolutely right. He's been a pro. Shout out G-Reg.
He does a great job. And it's not like Kirk's doing a bad job at the NFL level. He's been fine, but
Weird mix.
I weirdly think his like he works pretty hard clearly during the college football season. Traditionally, most people can respect Kirk's analysis. They might not agree, but they can respect it. It's usually well thought out. And in this situation specifically, like, I don't care, Brandon. You and I have both worked in the media industry. Like, you're telling me, hey, you're going to go prep for an NFL game for a Thursday night, sound intelligent for 3.5 hours, then fly, do a full game day show for 4 hours, 5 hours, and then on top of that, do an analyst duty for college football for 3 to 4 hours every single week.
And then on top
For
of that, also be the face of everything that's currently wrong with college football. I could see him managing the college football gig. I could see him managing that with the Amazon Prime gig, but also the dirty work that he put into slander Florida State throughout the last month of the season. That's some real effort. There's some real grind, some persistence, a lot of perseverance there from Kirk Herbstreit. So it should run out of time in the day.
I'll tell you what, Brandon, I look forward to an off-season podcast where we try to go through a conspiracy that Kirk Herbstreit ruined college football with his status as ESPN. I don't even know if there's any wheels to that, but he is a powerful man in the world of college football. He is the most listened to analyst. And that's what happens when ESPN's kind of had that jumbo package for 15 years now, since they took it from Fox back in the early teens. Joel Klatt does a great job too, but Kirk's still clearly, you're going to listen to Kirk. I mean, you're going to want his opinion traditionally if you're a college football fan, whether you agree with it or not. So
Joel Klatt clears, by the way. I don't think it's particularly close as far as the game to game, but Kirk's been the face of college football now for more than a decade. I get it. But it is what it is. But you're right. He is a good, color commentator, and I'll give him his flowers there. But it is it just doesn't feel like it's a good fit with him and Al Michaels. And I'd much rather have Al Michaels than Kirk Herbstreit in that seat. So that opens that up. You get Greg Olson there. Because when you think of these broadcasting duos, it's so much more about chemistry than it is even like
yes,
technical stuff, like how Gus and Joel get along so well. Even Kirk and Chris Fowler, and then of course Aikman and Buck were a package deal for that very reason. So it'll be interesting to see if Tom can just slide in and kind of fill that role that Greg's been doing at a very high level for several years now.
Yeah, for sure. And final point before we get into March Madness, but that chemistry absolutely matters. I mean, I'll be doing year 10 of play-by-play broadcasting in the near future. You've been doing it for a lot of years yourself. Like, that matters. Like, if they told me right now, hey, Drew Russell, Brandon Shanahan, you're going to do Westwood 1 coverage of NFL football on Thursday night, would you and I, would we be as prepared? Would we miss things compared to maybe the average, to a like Kevin Harlan or an Ian Eagle? Potentially, yeah. Like, we might not be as sharp as them in terms of the play-by-play coverage, but I guarantee if we work together as a duo, we would have quite a bit of on-air chemistry. I can guarantee that. So, like, there'd be no egos, at least on my end. Brandon Shanahan, he just wants his buffet at halftime, like Al Michaels. Get him the full bleeping spread. But again, that does matter. And, Greg Olson, I feel like, is a guy who, just easy guy to get along with. I think he'd be an easy, if you're a play-by-play guy, I would look to Greg Olson and be like, boy, that's tough not to be a fit, because I feel he's pretty good and flexible at what he does.
Yeah. You're absolutely right. But lots of good stuff going on this weekend. Big 12 tournament has come and gone. I kind of feel a little bit shafted. We filled out our brackets before the news that Kansas was missing Hunter Dickinson. So that's a bummer. I got to be honest with you, Drew Russell, though, now that I'm thinking about it and saying this out loud, I don't think I would have had the call to pick Cincinnati over Kansas.
Yeah, I mean, I texted you last Thursday. I saw the line for that Cincy Kansas game. Cincy's a favorite. I said they just played a game yesterday. They're a play-in team. It is Kansas. It's not like they don't have talent in the program. They're in KC. You're telling me they're a 3-point dog? Yeah, I'll give them a shot. Come on now. They're going to find a way. Nope, dead wrong. Absolutely lifeless for 40 minutes in Kansas City. And that game wasn't close. And, well, honest to God, Brandon, unfortunately, as excellent as the regular season was in the Big 12 tournament, pretty entertaining especially if you're an Iowa State fan. But the games themselves were not close, and they were not exactly memorable in terms of crazy finishes. I think average point differential was 16. You look at uh, a lot of teams, probably the best game, arguably, of the all of them, probably was Kansas State, Texas. That one went back
Wow,
and
that was
forth.
awesome.
That was a really good basketball game. A nice resume building win for the NIT for K State. So a lot of credit where it's due there. But um, yeah, the tournament itself wasn't, the games itself weren't as competitive as you would have liked to have seen. But uh, man, off the boy, if you're Brent Yormark in the Big 12, after kind of those, no one knew what was going to happen with the future of Kansas City. They announced, hey, we're going to be here through 2031. And then what a turnout over the weekend, last 3 days. And I know Iowa State fans made up a heavy chunk of it, but I mean, Brandon, I mean, that his arena gets loud usually for Iowa State games. I've seen in the past, all that. The power and light stuff usually fills up. I've never seen a crowd like that Friday, Saturday. It was off the rails. And then to have an after party at Power and Light where you have Shaquille O'Neal, DJ Diesel bringing it down, you just got thousands of people crammed in there. I thought the Big 12, I mean, good night. What a selling point of, hey, come have a few fun days here. I mean, what an event, and what a they gotta love what happened off the court. They have to. I think one of the most successful events probably ever in that department.
Yeah, it's interesting because the week started and that news was announced that the Kansas City will, keep getting the Big 12 tournaments, as we've been lobbying for quite some time. So maybe your Mark's tuning into the show. What's up, Brett? Can hop on anytime. I work just down the street from you, so we'll I'll come to you.
Howdy,
We'll make
Brandon.
that work. But and then I saw a lot of chirping from the new four schools, and rightly so, because like if I'm Arizona and I'm like, we got to go to Kansas City, right in the backyard of Iowa State and Kansas State, when there's a perfectly great neutral location like Las Vegas right next to me. Let's lobby for that. But I think this has been case in point, like exactly why Kansas State City needs to be the home for Big 12 basketball. And I got to admit, Drew Russell, I've heard Hilton South for a while now, and I thought,
Mhm.
oh, well, that's just something every fan base says. Like, oh, well, every fan base thinks that they travel well, or that they think that they take over neutral stadiums, or this or that. But when I tuned into that game on Saturday,
Yeah.
well, Saturday, right, with Houston, I
Yep.
was blown away. And then
Yeah.
the scene in at the Power Lights District in Kansas City, just I mean, out in blew my mind. I was like, oh, it's actually Hilton South. I get it now.
Yeah. And again, there's going to be certain fan bases, and it'll be interesting to see the tone of the new four schools that come in. They'll would have to make a significant trip to Kansas City to see the tournament. But I mean, atmosphere wise, Brandon, the only one that, and I still think I could make an argument, probably is better than the Big 12, is the Big East tournament. Madison Square Garden is, I mean, that arena is just crazy. Just the history of the arena, the history of that conference. That's still an incredible conference tournament atmosphere.
Yeah,
But the Big 12 is right there. And so when they get in Iowa State playing well, Kansas, K State, ETC, I got to say, I think it's a very clear number two. And some could argue number one, but I'll say number two. I'll respect the Big East history. But you have to admit, Brandon, there's no question about it. The tournament itself is great. Clearly, for Iowa State fans, a big deal. I think it helped with spring break for a lot of schools up here
yeah,
this week, so they got bigger numbers. But what an event, what a tournament, and what a run for multiple teams. Iowa State will start with, obviously, since they're the champion, three dominating victories. Kansas State, quality win, and then crushed Baylor. I mean, Baylor, not a bad Baylor team, really good Baylor team. Beat them easily. And then Houston, who was a 6-point favorite, best defense in the country. Iowa State just did not care. Offensively, pretty sharp on Saturday night, and then defense put them through the torture chamber in the first half, then decided to double down and do it again in the second half. A just clinic for Iowa State through 3 days. It was a most dominating performance I've seen, I think, by any team in tournament history. And I probably have the numbers to back it up based on point differential.
yeah, without a doubt. And I mean, it's not like that they came in like the overwhelming favorite, or some of those Kansas teams that were in the prime slot to compete for a national championship, but they came in, they took care of business swiftly, aggressively. It's so much to the point where I've heard folks chirp that it discounts the games because they were so dominant. It's clearly because the other team just didn't show up and we didn't get the best performance out of Baylor or the best performance out of Houston, which is ridiculous. But that just goes to show how locked in they were, which credit where credit's due. They've been getting hot lately, and this is exactly what they needed, especially after that loss against Kansas State late in the season. Like, this is exactly what they needed.
Yeah, and it'll be interesting to see, and we'll break down bracket in a minute, but just will that be for them and for a lot of teams? I mean, what a bizarre conference tournament week where we had a ton of bid stealers, and we'll dig into that soon. But I mean, will that stick going into the tournament? But I always say it's good to be hot going in, and when you win a conference tournament, that means you've won multiple games. So dominating for TJ Otzelberger. It's talked about some nationally, but I've got to reiterate this team went 2-22 and winless in the Big 12 3 years ago. And so to go from that to a 2 seed, which is Iowa State's highest seed in a tournament since 2000, 2001, nothing short of miraculous what TJ's been able to do. It's unbelievable. And just a lot of good talent, great program, a team that's easy to root for. A ton of credit where it's due for TJ's done phenomenal. It is what it is. We're going to go compete and just play it out. But that was an interesting debate that I think the majority of the country thought, hey, they've got, I didn't think they get a 1 seed, but I thought they'd be the 5th or 6th ranked team. No question about it. So
Yeah.
to see them be 8 and then get matched up with a dominant UConn region and just a great region in the East, definitely a kick to the stomach, I think, for fans, but I guarantee that locker room, they don't care. They're just going to go play. They have to. If they complain and say this isn't unfair, then guess what? They're going to be going home early. And that's a message for any team in the tournament. If you complain openly about, and no one will, but maybe behind the scenes, players bickering or maybe coaches are saying, what a stupid draw or something like that. You already lost. You got to just go compete. It might be fair. It might not be fair. You got to go compete, whatever that result is.
Absolutely right. I did just want to point out, I thought that was strange. I thought, because when we're talking about what we were hoping for Iowa State, it certainly wasn't the UConn region, which we feel like we would have, gotten to clear pretty easy. I mean, even the other 3 regions, with North Carolina, Purdue, and Houston.
Yep.
I probably wouldn't have wanted to be in Houston's region either, but that wouldn't have happened, right? You can't do that. Too tough.
Yeah, can't do that as a conference
Okay.
conference deal. You can't have a 1 and a 2 situation there. So, tough break for Iowa State, but again, they got to go compete. And at least they're playing in the tournament. I mean, Big 12, 8 teams in the tournament, well-deserved across the board with Houston a 1 seed, Brandon, Iowa State a 2, Baylor a 3, BYU a 6 seed, who I think could potentially do a little bit of damage. Texas a surprise 7 seed, thought they were a little higher than initially expected. TCU, Kansas a 4 seed, TCU a 9 seed, missing 1. But I think the key is that a lot of these teams, they're going to go compete. They're going to have good draws, but a noticeable team not playing, Brandon, Oklahoma. That was a very big surprise. They're the first team out, but a terrible break during conference tournament week where there were about 5-6 bid stealers in various conferences. Teams that had no shot of making it did, and some pretty good bubble teams got left out. I mean, very competitive. St. John's was very competitive against UConn on Friday night, and they were left out of the tournament, lost by 5 to the number 1 seed nationally. So just how it is this year, but for OU, a tough break considering I didn't even view them as a bubble team. I thought they were
going into the
firmly
tournament,
in.
we didn't even think about it. We thought maybe if TCU absolutely, falls apart, maybe they'll get left out. But yeah, I wasn't even thinking twice about Oklahoma. I was like, okay, a 19, bid is pretty much what we were all
Yeah,
told was going to happen.
right. Yeah, I don't think there was too much concern, but going back, I mean, you look at the Big 12 tournament again, Brandon, and when TCU and Oklahoma played, on Wednesday, that was a game where I was a little bit more concerned for TCU that, hey, if they don't
Yeah,
beat Oklahoma, if they're going to be kind of edging that line a little bit. They did win that game and then decide to not score a point for the first 12 minutes against Houston in the quarterfinal, which was just not less ideal. But who knew that game and that loss for OU? They win that game, they're probably going to make the tourney. But that
yeah,
game when they lost, I didn't really think, oh, they're out. Like, I thought they were still pretty
yeah,
safely in, and not even a last four team. Like, well, they'll be a 9 or a 10 seed, but
yeah,
that's how it broke down. Life's
yeah.
unfair now
Funny
and
how that
then.
works.
So,
It's crazy.
yeah.
Yeah,
So,
because I had a conversation with Bookie Brook, a friend of the program,
mm,
because he knows I'm a big 12 propagandist at his finals, and he asked me, he's like, "How in what world is Oklahoma a tournament team?" And I sent him the link to the NCAA selection criteria. I'm like, "Well, this is how." I mean,
mhm.
I'm not defending it. It's committee, this and that. And then I texted him Sunday night. I'm like, okay, well, technically, you asked if they were a tournament team. The NIT is technically a tournament. Then I found out they weren't even going to the NIT, so I guess not. Egg on my face there. I'll eat that one.
Yeah, that NIT stuff, that's bizarre. What a disaster. Let those mid majors play. Good night.
Yeah,
Just stupid. Tough to see because there are a lot of regular season champs in those mid lower conferences that
yeah.
did not win this year. From potential Cinderella darlings like a beloved Indiana State. Um,
Indiana State, we missed out.
we really did, even though Drake's pretty wild themselves, but we missed out Indiana State to those smaller conferences as well. But um, that's how the bracket breaks down. But it does show that clearly um, no one knows what's going on with the committee right now. And I know they had a very difficult job this year, Brandon. No question. You're not going to have me fight it. They were going to have to leave out some teams that, frankly, are deserving. I think on a few of them, but um, just brutal. I think some of the seeding, just complete mistakes. And as we dig into the bracket, I mean, like the East region, look, as an Iowa State fan, I was furious that to be a 2 seed in UConn's region in Boston. At the same time, if I'm a UConn fan, I'm furious that I'm the top overall seed and this is my draw.
No
Where,
kidding.
I mean, you have a red hot Iowa State team as your two seed. You have the Big Ten Conference postseason champs in Illinois who played very well in Minneapolis. And then an Auburn team that, I mean, Auburn's always athletic. And Bruce Pearl, he's a big fan of barbecues. He's going to have those guys ready to go. Not to mention three Final Four teams last year in this region in UConn, Florida Atlantic, who's an 8 seed. That could be a potential matchup.
Yeah, watch
Uh,
out.
and then San Diego State, who's a 5 seed, and I think a solid team once again. And I think even some interesting, Cinderella darlings. I mean, Yale as a 13 is pretty scary. I'm not a fan of that. Drake University, when I saw they were in Iowa State's area, I was not happy at all, Brandon. I mean, Drake can play.
Yeah,
They can really play. They're a favorite. They're a Vegas favorite over Washington State on Thursday. So clearly Vegas has some respect for Drake as
mhm.
well. And the seating in that East region, I think just compared to those other three, and I know I'm getting a little biased view, but I've read enough stuff nationally that I'm not the only one that what a tough break. And I'll say for UConn for sure too. I mean, you're a top seed. Yes, you got your region, but shoot, that's tough. That's really tough.
Yeah, because if I'm UConn, I mean, obviously I'm not getting Marquette as my 2 seed. Tennessee, I mean, they kind of laid an egg and they seem vulnerable. Arizona's no cakewalk, but I'd rather see a team that didn't just dog walk Houston
Right.
on a national stage, and then just a lot of gritty teams. BYU as a 6 seed in that region, that's or not a 6 seed. Are they a
Yeah,
6 seed?
BYU's a 6 seed in the East,
Yeah,
and that could be. I mean, that was
Auburn
another thing
too,
discussed. That could be
playing
I mean, if
great.
Iowa State gets through to the Sweet 16 and BYU pulls off an upset against Illinois, I mean, Iowa State, I don't like playing BYU.
I
I mean,
hate playing BYU.
when BYU's on, they can absolutely. They beat us once already this season. They could have beat us twice if they didn't go Colden Hilton. So that East is, I mean, whoever comes out of it, I think they're gonna have nothing but respect from me, no matter who that team is, because that is not a easy region at all. And the only region that I only picked one upset in my initial bracket in that region, Brandon, because I just think the top seeds are really good in that
Yeah.
region. I really do, and not that uh, a UAB isn't competitive or a Duquesne, but can't deny it. East is just a tough run, and for Iowa State and for BYU too, if they're looking to make a deep run in the second weekend, and of course they want to make a Final Four. Who doesn't? Not an easy run. Not an easy run for either team.
How do you think it's going to shape up when push comes to shove?
Say that again.
How do you think it's going to shape up there in the East? I mean, it's hard to bet
It's tough.
against you.
It's really tough to go against UConn, and yet every year they're always that top seed. Sometimes they absolutely come through, just pummel teams as expected. And ironically, the team that comes to mind is a fellow Big East in Villanova in
Yeah.
2018. I thought this Villanova team is loaded. I know like it's March Madness, upsets happen, but I can't pick against this team. They're too well balanced, good, and they ran over everybody in that tournament to winning it. I have the exact same feeling about this UConn team, Brandon, and that kills me to say it. But they got to play in Brooklyn the first two rounds, and then they've got to play in Boston the second two rounds if they can get out of Brooklyn. And UConn fans travel well in the
Mhm.
Northeast, similar to an Iowa State fan base in the Midwest, or KU or anything. They're a premier basketball program, and of course, I hope to get a shot with them, or maybe they'll be taken out before then if you're an ISU fan. But you can't deny it, Brandon. I mean, UConn, I've got coming out of the East right now, and I don't say that happily, but they're good. I can't physically go against them. I really can't.
Yeah, I mean, you mentioned that Villanova team from more than a half a decade ago. That was the last number one overall seed to win the national championship, if I'm not mistaken.
I believe you're
So, I mean,
right.
that's kind
Yeah.
of when you're looking at like the cardinal rules for filling out a bracket. Of course, not can't have all four number one seeds in the final four. That's too easy and doesn't happen. But yeah, the number one overall seed typically tends to struggle. UConn doesn't feel it's got a different feeling than some of the number one overall teams who have been heavy favorites coming in, like a couple of Duke teams that I would bet on, or
Mhm.
the Kentucky team all the way back when they had when they went undefeated. Um, but it's also it's tough for me to bet on somebody going back to back like that.
Mhm.
And if I'm gonna bet, if I'm gonna go against a favorite, I feel like those are, just some trends and tendencies
Mhm.
that I'll lean into. But it's also then like, well, who else? Because there's so many good teams in this bracket. Of course, I think that Iowa State's got a shot. I think that they absolutely can compete
Yeah.
with all of these teams. But it also kind of feels like, okay, well, that's just because I've probably watched more Iowa State than anybody else this year. So of course I'm going to be able to talk myself into that. But I mean,
It'll really. I
Auburn
mean,
looks
if
great too.
I will say this right now, Brandon. Assuming no upsets, let's say it's just top four seeds. You have a Sweet 16 of UConn versus Auburn and Illinois versus Iowa State. And I look at those two games like that is Elite Eight Final Four games right there. I mean, these are just
Yeah.
good programs, and it's not like San Diego State. I mean, they could be an interesting five seed if they find a way through
Yeah.
Auburn or Yale. Like, do I think they can compete with UConn for a bit? Maybe if they were more on the West Coast, I'd say they have a shot. But East is going to be a very interesting region for our two Big 12 teams. And obviously for our final six, hopefully they'll, on paper, they're easier regions, but there's no gimme to a Final Four or anything like that ever. So it'll be interesting to see.
Yeah. And certainly looking at the South now with the Houston getting the one seed. We got the PMT matchup with Wisconsin, James Madison. That'll be fun to watch via Twitter.
Man. Yeah.
Texas Tech in that region as the 6th seed. They'll be playing ACC champ NC State. So those are the two Big 12 teams out of that region. Again, now this feels like the region on this feels like the region where I feel the best about the one seed, but I also
Mhm.
do have some concerns about Houston. The way that they did come out and play against Iowa State. I mean, does that factor into any of this at all?
It could. It's conference tournaments are always fascinating to me because, I saw a Houston fan Saturday night vent on X that said, like, I think it's more impressive a team that wins the regular season championship than their conference tournament. And I agree, actually. I think, like,
Yeah,
for 2 months, like, you're telling me for two and a half months, you have to go through the grinder of 2 games a week, be on the road, usually at least 1 game, sometimes 2. It is not easy. And for Houston, a new team in the Big 12, to come in, win this league by 2 games this year, they are more than deserving of the 1 seed. No one remotely debates that, despite a disappointing effort Saturday, but they've clearly earned their position. And I guess the key, like, for that situation is it a blip in the radar? And going back to, like, that Villanova team, one of the years that they won the national championship, they lost, like, in the semis their conference tournament. So it does happen regularly. I think it was good for them. I'll use reverse psychology. I'll say, hey, they got their terrible game out of the way, bad shooting night. Now they're just going to, they're probably going to play looser. They're thinking, oh, we'll never play like that again.
yeah.
And I
Now we
think
know
that,
what not to do and what can
right.
happen if we even take a little bit of time off.
Yeah. And, though, and then if they can get through Longwood, which I feel is a near guarantee, uh, Nebraska, A&M, two very different teams in that region. You either face an in-state rival or a Nebraska team that loves to shoot bombs away with some of the most dynamic players in the country. Steph Teriyaki, is that the nickname we got for? What a legend he is. So for Houston, though, you have to not hate their draw. Though Duke is a 4-seed. Duke's Duke. They're always going to have put together quality teams, but man, you don't feel like this is a vintage tough Duke team compared to past Duke teams. And the ACC, where's that at this year? Marquette is a 2-seed, I think, is a very winnable game for Houston if that's their matchup.
To each their own, and that brings us to the Midwest region. And I have such a hard time. This and the West region are both giving me fits. Purdue, I feel the worst about as a 1 seed. You get the Zach Edey, and he doesn't quite get the Big Ten whistle in the big tournament like he usually does. Purdue's been kind of the poster child of low seed upsets over the last couple of years. So it's a tough look for them. I have no confidence that they'll be able to do much. It's just a matter of when they go down and who does it. I'm sure they'll get past the first round. I can't imagine losing to the
Or
16th seed 2 years in a row.
you cannot
There's a team
deny,
to do
though,
it.
Brandon, the narrative. Just imagine, and I think it's unbelievably unlikely, but if Montana State or Grambling State beat Purdue in the first round, I think Matt Painter gets fired. Does he this guy, it'd be an interesting hypothetical that this guy, multiple Big Ten championships, all this, but like the tournament, they just collapse.
Yeah, and
if I'm an AD, I would have to have the convo, right?
Yeah, and when you're looking at the future, you're not going to have Zach Edey to get you 25 free throws a night moving forward. Maybe put time to hit. I'm kind of here for it.
You can't deny. You and I are both narrative-based broadcasters, Brandon, that love a good narrative to just unfold. And boy, this is a narrative of Purdue continues to choke that just would be, yes.
Give it to me.
Yeah, you want it. You want it. So, yeah. But no, if we're looking at the Midwest region in general, Purdue's your top seed, Tennessee is the 2, Creighton the 3, and then Kansas the 4. Look, it's do or die for Kansas. No one feels bad for Kansas. Kansas has dominated for so long. It's been kind of funny to see them kind of have an average season and a horrible season by their standards. But I don't think it's a bad draw for them in general. Samford's a really good team. I got them round 1. And I think whether that's Gonzaga or McNeese, round 2, I think is a winnable game for them as well. And if they play Purdue, there's no reason I don't think that they can't compete in Detroit if they can make it that far. I'm not sure they can, but Kansas, I think, got a very good draw. And then Texas is a 7 seed is a fascinating one, Brandon, because I thought they were seeded a bit high. I kind of went through their wins and schedule again, and they do have some nice wins. but still was surprised how easy they got into the tournament. Um, but they're going to have I think a very winnable first round game, whether that's Colorado State or Virginia. And I do think they can compete with Tennessee. Tennessee, I know, similar to Purdue, has that label of, hey, they're good in the regular season, postseason, for some reason, they just do not get it done. And I mean, this Texas team, no one can deny the talent. That's always the narrative in Texas. They've got the talent. Is the execution there? We're going to find out.
Yeah, and it's the region to me that has the most good teams who I feel horrible about. We talked about Purdue there. Creighton and Tennessee both kind of got dog walked in their first tournament game, in their conference tournament that they absolutely should have won. And I came across a trend that no team in modern history's lost their first conference championship game and then got on to win anything. So that makes me feel icky. For those teams, Texas, we talked about Kansas there. I mean, same boat with them getting dog walked by Cincinnati. Boy, there's just there's going to be no real confidence at any point filling out the Midwest region for me.
I feel like the Midwest has the most potential to go off the rails. Like, no one, I don't think, would be stunned if Purdue's playing in their backyard for the first two rounds. They are playing in Indianapolis.
Yeah.
And I forgot to mention, I mean, I mentioned Texas, I mentioned Kansas. TCU is also in that region as well. And I need to mention our beloved Horned Frogs quick because Utah State is a good team, good Mountain West program. I think that it's going to be a very close first round game. But you can't tell me if TCU wins, Brandon. I mean, they are physical. They are going to get in your grill. They do have a couple of quality offensive players. It'll be a road game for them, but TCU's been good on the road this season in the Big 12. You can't tell me they can't compete with Purdue. I think they could make that game very interesting if that's a round of 32 matchup. And do not tempt me with a good time to take TCU because I really think they can play with Purdue. I'll tell you that right now.
Yeah.
So I'll tell you that now. I mean, I really do believe that.
Yeah, that's boy. This does feel like the region that would like the most likely to have a double-digit seed make the Final Four.
I mean, everybody's picking like McNeese State. I mean, McNeese is a 12 seed. They're 30-3. I still think Gonzaga is a pretty good 5 seed. Like Gonzaga, I mean, they went to Kentucky and took it to them mid-season. But I mean, Samford obviously is a trendy pick. Look, I'd keep an eye on Oregon as an 11 seed. Like Oregon, last 2 times they made as an automatic qualifier when they weren't supposed to make the tournament, went to the Sweet 16 both times as a double-figure seed. So this region has the potential to go off the rails. There's no doubt about it, but maybe it'll play straight up. Who knows?
Yeah. So if I gotta pick a team, I
gotta say your beloved Creighton Blue Jays, Brandon. I really like their potential.
Yeah, I guess I'll go with them because I love their experience. A lot of these, they have a lot of returning production from last year's team who were, I mean, inches away from making their first Final Four in school history last year. If they had just won one Big East championship game in that conference tournament, I'd feel so much better about them. But
that's fair.
Yeah, I mean, if I got to pick a team, I feel probably the least bad about them.
There's not like one team in this I'm like, I feel fully confident. In fact, ironically, if you told me the East bracket, if you told me Iowa State, Illinois, or Auburn is in that Midwest, honest to God, Brandon, I think I would consider taking any one of those 3 teams the Final Four if they were playing in this similar situation. So, but that's the bracket. That's a bracket. So, but it could go off the rails.
Cookie crumbles. And then finally, our West region, just Baylor making it from the Big 12. We also got Arizona, future Big 12 team. So, for the agenda, we can claim them. I have no wiles against that. North Carolina, as far as a 1 seed, I feel okay about. especially compared to like Purdue. But boy, still a lot of question marks there. Alabama, same kind of thing where they have not impressed me down the stretch.
Yeah.
And also just my pure hatred for the SEC probably won't have them advancing too far in that bracket. And then Baylor and Arizona down at the bottom half of that bracket, kind of the two teams that I'm looking at. And as you had mentioned earlier, with the perception of how Houston played in the Big 12 tournament, maybe that was the get right game for Baylor. They'll have a couple of games where I feel really good about them against Colgate's
Yeah.
and then Dayton and Nevada, or as they like to call it up in Iowa, Nevada. Um, so we'll see there. Arizona's a tough peach. I hate having like 1, 2, 3, 4 seeds in the Elite Eight, in the Elite Eight. But I do, or no,
A Sweet 16.
yeah, Sweet 16. But if there is a 2-3 matchup that I feel good about, it's Baylor and Arizona.
Yeah, I kind of agree. Arizona is, I think, I could make an argument the most intriguing team of this tournament because no West Coast team, and I think we're looking like, I don't know what the specific line is. It'd be, I guess, east of Lawrence, Kansas East. But no West Coast team has won an NCAA tournament since Arizona in '97.
Wow.
So it's been a long time since a West Coast team has done it. I really liked the draw for future Big 12 team Arizona, just in general. They're going to play. I got to ask you, did you hear about that Long Beach State head coach, Greg, was it Monson? I believe his name. You're going to like
No.
this. Okay, you're going to like this story. So Long Beach State finished fourth in their conference this season, Brandon. And their AD and the coach had a conversation before their conference tournament, and they decided they're going to part ways at the end of the year. So, but they said, I'll let you coach your team. You've earned that opportunity to go coach your team during the conference tournament. What did the beloved Long Beach State do? They do nothing but win and go out and win 3 games and win their conference tournament, the Big West tournament. So now they're going to be coaching. They're going to have a coach who usually it's an incoming head coach. It's going to be an outgoing head coach is going to coach this team in the tournament, which I think is absolutely crazy. First time they made it in 12 years.
I was expecting that story to end with, the AD decided to give him another year.
There's been no. I think the AD does not want that egg on his face. And he already has it.
Yeah.
But I guess he views it like, I can't go back. Like, my word's my word.
Yeah.
But at the same time, you just had a coach and you have a team that's
yeah.
that team will probably, assuming they go through with it and this coach leaves, they're going to lose that entire team or most of it to the portal. So weird story though. So for Arizona, it's a fascinating story just in itself.
That's a great point. Yeah, I guess now if I'm gonna pick a 2 seed to go down in the first round, that's probably where I'm looking. Them or
you can okay. So we're talking storylines and narratives. You cannot deny that storyline would be. I mean, it's pretty insane
powerful
already. It's an insane story. Like they could lose by 30, and I'm still like, that's a pretty wild story.
Yeah.
If they somehow can make this a game, and hey, many 2 seeds have lost in this tournament. Can they? I mean, why not? That'd be pretty nuts.
That feels like a March Madness-esque story, just in.
I mean, I can just already see the CBS morning show just going nuts. They're like, got to get a camera on. Like that's you can't make that stuff up if that actually happened. But Arizona in general, I like their draw. Baylor, I think, can give them a game if that's the matchup in the Sweet 16. But the games are being played out in Los Angeles. But if Arizona somehow makes the Final Four, Brandon, games are in Phoenix this year. So they would have that home state advantage, which could play a nice factor for sure. So, but that's going to be a very interesting bracket. UNC, I feel like it's UNC and yet kind of not getting a lot of respect. To put Rodney Dangerfield's name into consideration, but I mean, I thought, their 8-9 game, whether that's Mississippi State or Michigan State, I like that matchup for UNC, but Alabama can put up 90, 100 any given night. So that could be that game could be really fun. That'd be a track meet between those two. But Baylor, I think, can make a Sweet 16. And on the right night, maybe an Elite 8 or Final Four.
Yep. So who's in your Final Four in most of your brackets?
Right now,
What's that shaping out to be?
I
Because
got
it's
UConn.
tough without looking at the bracket because you can't just go like the four best teams or the four. You really got to
Yeah.
dive into matchups and how things play out. And
So last year, okay, so UConn was a 4 seed last year.
yeah, I'm pretty sure I went 0 for 4.
San Diego State was a 5. Miami was a 5. And Florida Atlantic, I believe, was a 9.
Yeah,
That was your final 4 last year. I mean,
yeah,
that last year's tournament was just off the rails. Just
yeah. That was a different breed
sheer
of
stupidity.
madness.
It was just sheer stupid. I mean, when you have Florida Atlantic and San Diego State as a Final Four game, you had just a bizarre tournament. Um, but I've got look, Brandon. Until I see it, I won't believe it. I've got UConn in the East. Pains me to do it, and I mean, but I do like that home court advantage for them. They seem to play. They're playing at all cylinders. But I'm telling you right now, Auburn or Iowa State can give them a game if the seeding plays as is. And shoot, Florida Atlantic won't be a slouch if they can find a way to get to the round of 32. They're hearing a lot of hate about they don't deserve to be in the tournament. I'm sure they'll pull up Michael Jordan, take that personally. So that'll be interesting to see on the East. West, I got Arizona. I really do, and Arizona's burned me so many times, but I always seem to respect what they do. Key will be, do they play enough good competition in the Pac-12 this year? I think is going to be the big key for them. But I really do like their draw. If they play UNC or Alabama, that's a Los Angeles game. No reason that shouldn't be mostly Arizona fans. So that's a pretty good break for them. South, I've got Houston. Houston, I think, is going to do it in terms of that situation. Houston, I think, got a good draw. I think they can go through. And then the Midwest, I'm going to be playing with this for a while, but I got your beloved Creighton Blue Jays right now. They were so close last year. Should have made it, or very, very close last year. We don't need to relive that painful Elite Eight, but I think they can get it done this year. I like their draw. Greg McDermott, what he's done clearly in Omaha, been tremendous for sure. But it'll be dead wrong. This will be in the trash by Thursday night, I'm sure, Brandon.
Without a doubt.
But I mean, that's my gut instinct. Those are my gut instincts for that Final Four.
You know, I feel like folks who lean too heavily on the big seeds get flack for having a soft bracket or having unrealistic favorites, and what fun is that? But maybe in a lot of cases you're prolonging the delay, because if you pick a 7 seed to go into the Final Four, I mean you might be out of luck with your national champion out on night one, and unless you have Purdue in your bracket, then you're not really used to that. But pretty similar, I guess. Boy, this is gonna feel delusional. I'll take Iowa State out of the East. There's something so special about this team where they just haven't let me down, and
Yeah.
I'm buying in. Real tough draw. I mean, boy, they're gonna have to grind their teeth, but they've been grinding their teeth throughout the
Yeah.
whole season. They've won the big games. They took care of the winnable games that Iowa State's looked past it and before, and I think this is the best Iowa State team that I can see with my own eyes. I love Houston out of the South. Like I said, good draw. I don't really feel great about any of the other top 5 seeds. Kentucky worries me a little bit, but I see a lot of vulnerability there. And then the Midwest, yeah, I'll go Creighton too. Roll Jays. The experience feels like just enough to make me feel less worried about them. I won't pick them to win it because I'm such a big believer in trends. You got to win a conference tournament game. And then in the West again, this feels delusional and this feels like I'm pushing an agenda, but I'll take Baylor. I
Yeah.
feel like they're a team that has a good couple of draws. They got Colgate. I don't feel great about Clemson or New Mexico. And by then, Long Beach State might be going on a run. I feel so much better about them than before this episode started. And then, it could be a dogfight with North Carolina. Maybe they stumble along the way, and you face a Alabama team that gets cold and sloppy. If they're not 100% dialed in, that game could get out of hand. So, yeah, I'll go 3-4. I'll go 3 Big 12 teams and a Omaha team. That's not
I'll say this
delusional.
on Baylor, Brandon. If they can beat Arizona or get through that round of 16, I really like them against either
Yeah.
Alabama or UNC. I do. I'm kind of with you. I don't know. My gut says Arizona, but if Baylor can get through that game, I fully agree with you. I'd put them in the
Yeah.
Final Four, and I might tinker enough through 11:20 Wednesday or Thursday morning before I have to officially submit this. Uh, but looking just at the Big 12, I mean, so you have Houston's a 1 seed, Iowa State's a 2, Baylor 3, KU 4. So, we're all those teams, I guess, seeding wise, if they made the Final Four or make a deep run the tournament, that's expected. Like, people expect
Yeah.
you to make the second weekend if you're one of those seeds. I want to talk about the other 4 seeds quick. BYU is a 6. We have TCU as a 8, or excuse me, a 9. Texas is a 7, and then Texas Tech is a 16. Those 4 teams, who do you think has the most chance to make like a unlikely run or improbable run? Maybe not like, let's say second weekend. Let's just say round of 16 or even an Elite 8, or hey, you never know. It's a tournament, maybe a Final Four. What of those 4 teams stands out to you that maybe could pull a run like that?
Oh boy, that's a good question. I mean, just seating wise, I don't like where TCU is going to Indianapolis and beating up on Purdue. That feels like a tough ask. Kansas, do we know the status of their guys? Are they coming in just as
They're going to
hobbled as
play,
they
but
were?
what's the percentage is going to be the big question with McCullough and Dickinson.
Yeah, and I mean, at best case scenario, they're going to be so cold, and I mean, Samford's no joke as a 13 seed to get out of there, so I don't like them. Texas is intriguing. I don't feel too great about Tennessee. I think they got
Yep.
a real good draw there, but then you run into Creighton there in the Sweet 16. I'm not a huge fan of that. I would probably say BYU. I like
Mm-hmm.
their first couple of matchups. I think they can get after a team like Illinois. I could very much anticipate Illinois looking at Brigham Young University and kind of overlooking them. Maybe they got their eyes set on the matchup with the Clones up next, or even might even be a situation where the Clones stumble and they're looking at a clear path where they don't have to beat higher
Mm-hmm.
than a 7 seed, and trip up against the Cougars. So they're probably the team I would keep my most of an eye on to get to the Elite Eight. Um,
Yep.
Boy, that would be real. Boy, I'm just pushing this Big 12 agenda. I mean, a big Iowa
Our
State,
job, isn't it?
BYU,
Our
Elite
job to
Eight.
push we got to
I'm
put.
my
Maybe I'm not
God.
pushing the agenda enough. You know what, Brandon? Maybe I need to say Iowa State, Baylor, Houston, and Texas. Yeah, not Texas. Excuse me, TCU. That's my Final Four. Maybe I'm just messing. Maybe I'm not doing my job, Brandon. Maybe I need to throw rationalization out the window and go off the rails. Let's just, you know what? Just a sheer delusional bracket. Nothing but Big 12 success. Nothing but Elite Eights and Final Fours and champions.
Well, I mean, well, if you think about it this way, if you go all in on the Big 12, I'm going to do one bracket like this. If you go all in on the Big 12 and a couple of those teams break through, I mean, you're probably cashing in. You're probably cashing in. I mean, I guess you got to pick the right Big 12 teams when it comes to, matchups like BYU, Iowa State, but
Yeah. But
I mean,
I mean, I might just need to be more delusional in the next couple of days when picking a bracket. But we'll see what this conference does this year. And the Big 12 has gotten a lot of hate for garnering the system where they did, as a conference, didn't play a lot of great non-conference games. There's certain teams that was a big discussion with Iowa State of why they were
mhm.
seated where they were at. They didn't like their non-conference schedule. I thought the 10 quad wins might be
Yeah.
something that I would care about, but whatever.
Figure dog walking the best team in the country, going
Yeah,
2-1 against, number 2 overall seed. I feel like that adds more weight than, whether or not you play teams like a Wisconsin in the offseason or,
I feel like it
St.
makes sense, but
Paul.
whatever. You know what? It is what it is. But just looking at that scenario and looking at these teams in general, I mean, you have to be. We're gonna see where they go. I mean, this is the time of year where conferences sometimes they're like, boy, they got those conferences wrong in terms of seeding. They were way better than they thought, or vice versa, where there was one year I remember when the Big Ten had like 7-8 teams in. This was a couple of years
Yeah,
ago.
I remember that.
They had multiple high seeds, all lost, and there was no teams left by the Sweet 16. They're like,
Yep.
man, we might have valued them a little too much.
Yeah, I can see that.
But there are other years where like conferences barely get any teams in, and then they get multiple teams that make a solid run. So, I mean, there is just those, I think, situations, Brandon, where, what is that status and what is that future for sure. But this is the time to shine. It really is.
It's March. I can't wait for it. We'll be breaking it down throughout the process and what it means for the Big 12. Because you're right. I think this is a very important year for the Big 12 conference. It feels like they're getting the proper respect, kind of coming into the tournament. Maybe not seeding wise, but just reputation wise, it feels like there's a lot of consensus that they're the best conference in college basketball, and kind of dethroning, for most of our time, the Big East and the ACC, and that one weird year where the Big Ten got a million teams in. That was weird.
Mhm.
But this could be a year where they could flop, and now all of a sudden it gets so much harder to get to that 1-2 seed if you don't have that great non-conference schedule like Iowa State does. Or all these teams could show out and be like, all right, well, the committee was wrong about the Big 12. Maybe this is as good as Brandon and Drew on their podcast say it is.
I couldn't have put it better
No.
myself. That just sounds like nothing but facts. But what a tournament! Obviously, a lot of excitement for the men's tournament. The women's tournament is going to be very interesting as well. And the Big 12, Texas is a 1 seed, so they're going to be looking to do some damage. But Kansas State, as a team, I'm keeping an eye on that women's side, is a 4 seed in Iowa's region, which could be a very interesting Sweet 16.
Tough region, tough draw for the GOAT.
Hey, as much as you and I can joke about Iowa and Caitlin Clark stuff, similar to, I think, how I felt about Iowa State. If Iowa can get through that little region, make a Final Four, am I happy about it? Of course not. But I'll respect it a little bit. Like, that's not an easy region. But K-State's a good team, and they've had good success against Iowa the last couple of years. So that's somebody to keep an eye on. Iowa State, they'll try to make a little bit of a run. But Oklahoma, regular season champ, we'll see what they do. But it's the best time of year, Brandon. This is great, man. This is March. This is John Rothstein, Twitter legend. This is legit. I mean, this man is willing to go through a divorce if he needs to, just to make sure that he gets March Madness. And that's the type of devotion that you have to, it's psychotic, but you have to respect.
It's obsession, and some that fuels all the greats.
Yeah, I mean, you have to be a little bit, I think, sick in the mind to be great, and that's what you get with the great John Rothstein.
Without a doubt. Any final thoughts before we wrap up, DR?
Oh, what a time of year. What an exciting week. And best of luck to all the conference tournament teams. Great week this last week. Big 12, they've got to be very pleased with how the conference tournament went, just from numbers-wise, crowd-wise, and hopefully it keeps up.